Hey there, church. It's a drizzly spring day, and standing out here in this gentle rain has me thinking about our Sabbath practice and some of what I've experienced, some of what I think others have told me. That this Sabbath concept command is really delightful sounding. One of the pillars of Sabbath is delight. Who wouldn't want to spend one day a week just enjoying delight? And who in today's world couldn't use a little stop and rest in their weekly rhythm? But it turns out that this is hard, that there is resistance within us. Even if we stop and rest and find some ways to delight, we find that maybe the hours of downtime in Sabbath are more than we're accustomed to, and maybe a little bit more than what we feel we can bear without growing antsy and restless. Or we find that in the system of life that we've got right now, carving out the time for stopping and resting is just really, really hard to do. And so that's where I want to give you some encouragement. If you're like me and you start something, there's a little voice in you that says, am I doing this right? Am I doing this well? How can I be better? I really want to become good at practicing Sabbath. And that's really not the point. The point is more to engage the practice, even in the ways that it may not always feel wonderful, but to engage the practice and to keep engaging the practice. And kind of like a runner who's learning to run and feels kind of miserable on the early runs, but keeps on running, will find that running can, in fact, become quite pleasurable. And over time, the runner's body is shaped. And that's basically how it works with spiritual practices like Sabbath. That as we keep engaging the practice has its influence on us. We find that we are inhabiting our lives differently, that we're practicing Sabbath differently without really trying to, but because the grace of the practice has made an impact on how we're living. The practices do rest on grace. So give yourself some grace if you are doing Sabbath and are finding it kind of rough. And let's be especially open as we approach Holy Week, which begins a week from Sunday. Let's be especially open to how this week is so full of the grace of God. Yes, it absolutely reveals the level of rebellion that human beings mount to against God as our great Lord and lover. But it also is such a wide open window to God's pursuit of us, God's bearing with and suffering for us, and is full of what the grace of God looks like in the person Jesus Christ. So, as Lent turns toward its end and we celebrate our last Sabbath practice, I do wish you the fullness of God's grace and persistence in loving God, sharing relationships, serving others from the heart of Christ.